In this video, I want to talk to you about lenses and some of the things you might need to consider before buying a lens. Now, lenses are obviously an essential piece of photographic equipment, but with so many options available, it can be difficult to know what it all means and how to choose the right one. So I'm going to run through a few of the points that can help you to choose the right lens for you and your needs. Put simply, lenses are pieces of glass that have been shaped and polished to magnify the light so that they're usable optical instruments. Now, they come in a variety of shapes and sizes with a number of different features, which I'll look at in more detail after. When looking at which lens is best for you, it's worth looking at these features and considering which are most relevant to you and your photography needs. Now, whether you're shooting food or fashion, you really want the right lens for the job. So it's important to understand the differences between things like prime lenses and zoom lenses, as well as the various focal lengths and what's best suited. First of all, let's look at prime lenses and zoom lenses. Now, prime lenses are lenses that feature a fixed focal length. Now, they're available in a range of different focal lengths, and prime lenses are known for delivering high quality images. They also generally offer much wider apertures compared to zoom lenses. Size-wise, prime lenses tend to be smaller than zoom lenses, which can be a definite advantage if you're wanting to travel light. Now, with less moving parts, prime lenses are also often cheaper than zoom lenses. Further advantages of using a prime lens is that it encourages you to explore your scene more by moving around. Being restricted to just one focal length means you have to move around to find the best composition, rather than just experimenting with different focal lengths by zooming. However, you're also limited with prime lenses. Having just one focal length means you may need several different lenses to cover all your needs, which can quickly add up to more in weight and in cost. Zoom lenses are powerful tools that cover a variety of needs. Whether you're shooting landscapes or sport, zoom lenses offer a convenient solution by providing a variety of different focal lengths in one lens. Now, depending on the range, you could use one lens for anything from landscape to portraiture. Flexibility is the biggest advantage of zoom lenses. The ability to zoom reduces the need for multiple prime lenses. Instead, one zoom lens can serve a variety of purposes. However, you may find yourself sacrificing quality and cost for convenience. Zoom lenses generally fall within the higher price bracket, yet they fail to deliver the quality associated with the very best prime lenses. They can also be quite big and bulky and don't always offer the wider apertures that prime lenses do. Now, as you probably already know, lenses come in a variety of different focal lengths, and those focal lengths relate to the angle of view that the lens can record. So let's take a look at this graphic, which gives a good example of a variety of different lens categories. Starting at the widest angle, we've got fisheye, and fisheye lenses basically record a 180-degree field of view. But fisheye lenses have a tendency to distort the content of the image. Moving up from the fisheye to maybe 14mm, we go to ultra-wide angle lenses, and this can range from 14mm up to about 24mm. And these lenses also record a great angle of view into the image, but with less distortion than a fisheye lens. Now, moving up from ultra-wide angle, we have wide angle. This ranges from 24mm up to about 35mm, and you can see that angle of view starting to decrease. Standard lenses are often focal length of around 50mm. Moving up from standard, we have short telephoto. 85mm to 100mm would be considered short telephoto lenses, and the 85mm lens is particularly popular for portrait photography because it's quite flattering in the perspective that it offers. Moving up there, we go to telephoto, so anything from 135mm up to 200mm, maybe 250. And then from there, we're into super telephoto. That's in the realms of 250mm all the way up to 600 and beyond. And those are the lenses that are used often by wildlife and sports photographers for closing in and zooming right in on an image. The key thing to think about when you're thinking about lenses is the angle of view, because essentially what's happening is that the angle of view is just becoming narrower and narrower, which is essentially increasing the magnification of the subject that's recorded. Now at this point it's also worth mentioning about the sensor type or the sensor size, because we have different size sensors for cameras, such as crop sensors, full frame 35mm, or medium format sensors. And the way our focal lengths work, they vary in relationship to sensor sizes. So a 80mm lens on a full frame 35mm camera will not give the same angle of view as an 80mm on a medium format camera or on a crop sensor camera. So the manufacturers make lenses that also suit the equivalent angle of view for different camera formats. Now, before buying any lens, you should find out your camera's crop factor and use it to calculate the lens's effective focal length. For example, a 50mm lens will have an effective focal length of around 75mm when used on a camera with a 1.5 crop factor. Now, although the focal length remains the same, the angle of view is reduced by that smaller sensor. Now, I discussed the different sensor types in my Camera's Buyer Guide video, which you can find on the blog here at carltayloreducation.com. The next important thing to consider with lenses is the aperture, or at least the maximum aperture that is achievable on that lens. The aperture is what determines how much light can be captured through the lens and allow that light to be recorded on the sensor. It obviously also controls something called depth of field and how much we can blur the background. So if you often find yourself working in low light, a lens with a wider maximum aperture may be a better choice for you. Having a wide aperture will allow you to use faster shutter speeds when photographing handheld or fast-moving subjects. Lenses with wider apertures also allow you to increase the bokeh, that's the aesthetic quality of the outer focus area behind your main subject when you're using shallow depth of field. Image stabilization is another important feature on many lenses. It's designed to reduce blur and camera shake in our images. Image stabilization can be a particularly useful feature when working handheld or in low light conditions. While it's a common feature on the newer model lenses, it's worth checking to see if this feature is available on older model lenses, especially if you're buying second-hand. Image stabilization is indicated differently by each of the camera manufacturers. For example, with Canon it's known as IS, with Nikon it's VR, and with Sigma it's OS, and with Tamron it's VC for vibration control. So how do you choose the right lens for you? Well, it's worth taking the time to think about the factors that I've mentioned already. What you'll be using the lens for is important. Does your lens require a zoom, or is image stabilization important, or would you be better with a prime lens with a wider aperture? Think about what you'll be photographing. Will you be focusing primarily on portraits or wildlife or product photography, and start to think about the focal lengths that are most applicable to those genres. Now remember, lenses are an important piece of your kit, so it's worth taking the time to think about those requirements carefully. Read reviews and if possible, even rent the lens before you buy it. Now, to help give you an idea of what lenses are best for different genres of photography, these are some of my most commonly used lenses. So for portrait photography, I generally use my Hasselblad 80mm f2.8 or my 100mm f2.2. Now the 80mm lens on the Hasselblad is equivalent to 60mm in a 35mm format, and my 100mm lens on the medium format Hasselblad is equivalent to about 73mm in the 35mm format. For fashion photography, I use the Hasselblad 35mm lens for my wider angle shots, which would be equivalent to about 26mm in the 35mm format, but I also use the same 80mm lens and the 100mm lens too. For my product photography, I often use the 80mm lens, which is equivalent to 60mm in 35mm format, and I use the 100mm lens, equivalent to around 73mm in the 35mm format. And I use those lenses often with extension tubes so that I can focus the lens closer to my subject. For landscape photography, I tend to use my 28mm lens, which would be about 21mm lens on a 35mm format camera. And I also use a 35mm lens, which would be equivalent to about a 26mm lens on a 35mm format. Now, if you're thinking about buying second-hand lenses, it's certainly worth investing in the best lens you can afford. But if you're on that limited budget, then second-hand can be a good option for you. And I cover this in much more detail in one of our other videos on YouTube, but you can find that video in the blog post here on carltayloreducation.com. Now, when we're looking at second-hand lenses, some of the things I highlight in that video, but I'll mention now as well, are things to be careful for. Look for scratches and dents that may indicate the lens has been mistreated or mishandled. Check for mold or any shaking or vibration that might indicate loose elements inside the lens barrel. And see if the aperture blades are working correctly and not sticking. When you're deciding on which camera lens is best for you, it is worth taking your time. Take the time to consider the points I've mentioned above, and if you're struggling to find something to fit your budget, take some time to maybe save a little bit more. Buying a camera is a big investment, but buying a collection of lenses will probably cost you more than your camera, and they'll be with you for longer because you're going to upgrade your camera further down the line. This is why it's really important to consider your lenses carefully before you make those decisions. Get my completely free photography course with no sign-up required. You can also access our free 90-page ebook. Just click the link or go to carltayloreducation.com.